Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I think most of our audience knows everybody, but just let me quickly introduce Vikram Chandra, who's the founder of Editor G Technologies, Raheel Khursheed, the former head of news, politics, and government for Twitter in India, Ritu Kapur, the CEO of Quintilon Media and the co-founder of the Quint, and Rajiv Makhni, of course, managing editor, technology, NDTV, and tech guru. And I'm just going to hand it over to Rajiv now to take it away. Rajiv, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think great opportunity. Thank you so much for, putting this all together, Manika. And always, I think both in terms of the topic and in terms of the panelists, I think this is going to be absolutely fantastic. But I have to confess that I'm here, less moderator, more as somebody who really wants to learn, because the panelists, which, Manika has already introduced, really do represent almost everything that I want to know about this, because there's so much that is being spoken about out here. So I'm going to start off by saying welcome to a whole new world to everybody that is out there in the audience. Better or worse world, that's what we are here to determine. A world where pretty much anything that happens online now, a movie streaming, a post, a social media platform, a message between you and maybe another person, every single thing now, a piece of news that is published online, everything is going to be governed by a new set of rules that we've never seen before. The Information Technology Rules 2021, or more famously known as the Intermediary Rules. Now, fundamentally and dramatically, this changes the way that you and I and all of India will now interact and experience everything online. It's completely different. You read through, even if you give it a cursory look, it's very, very different. And what you'll feel is either draconian or liberty, it's throttling down, or is it safer, crippled, or are we soaring higher, maybe all that and more. And the way I absorb it and understand it, like I said, I'm here to really learn. Because these new rules bring government control instead of regulation, strict enforcement instead of self-regulation. And many go against the very nature of how I understand technology. I mean, there are things that I can't even believe will actually work. Some undermine free expression and privacy. So lots of things out here to actually talk about. So I'm going to now take you through what is it that I would like to do, because sometimes online panel discussions can go a little haywire and, become more a speech panel. So awesome panel. We'll use this panel the way I hope we can to make sure we use the power of the platform correctly and to keep this engaging and very, very interactive. Here's the format I think we'll follow. So first, I'll open the platform to each of the panelists, give them about 2 or 3 minutes to tell us a little bit more about what they truly feel. From the time they've actually heard about the rumors that were coming about these new rules, the time they actually started reading about each and every one of them, absorbed them, reacted to them. What did it make you feel personally? How does this affect what you do in a professional way? This will help us to establish where each of you actually stands and feels. And therefore, from there, I will come to each of you with specific questions. So at that point, we'll make it very, very interactive. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with, of course, Vikram. Tell me, 2 or 3 minutes, what do you feel? Where are we going? Is this good or bad?
I think to be honest, the rules themselves, and we've all heard so much about it and the steps that are happening, to my mind at least, is just one part of the continuum, right, of a lot of things that are happening across the board. And in my view, it's a trend which started some time back. It's continuing in many, many ways. And it's not just happening at the center, by the way. It's happening at the center. Yes, it's happening at states. It's eventually going to happen at the district level. It's going to happen at the Thanedar level. It's going to happen at every level. And I think part of what I'm saying is that this entire concept that we once had, you can say what you want, you have full freedom of speech or the full freedom of expression, blah and blah. Those are the sort of things that we all grew up with. I think there are restrictions and there's a curtailment coming on it in any case. And I think the income tax rules, such as they are only going to be one more step in that. If you look at some of what's been happening, if you're writing, and especially if you're in the business of journalism, or you're in the business of actually going out there and reporting on that, we have to understand that at the end of the day, you're in the position where, by definition, you're supposed to be looking at a person in a position of authority and questioning that person, or talking that person, or challenging that person in some form or the other. Could be the central government, It could be the state government, it could be the Thanedar, it could be your local MLA, it could be the principal of your school, it could be anybody. By definition, you're sometimes, and I'm assuming you're a school journalist in that case. The fact that you are having the ability for multiple laws to be used to throttle down on that, and the fact that the judiciary is no longer appears ready or able to step up and quash all of that at the very beginning, means that I think we were already heading for some sort of trouble long before these particular rules came. And in fact, and this is somewhat a unpopular and almost a radical sort of a thought, which I'm just going to throw out there, and then maybe everyone can debate it and discuss it. I'm wondering if somewhere in these rules and the structures that are being spoken about, there isn't the possibility for maybe a partial solution to some of the other things that are going on. Like, for example, if there is a requirement that you should have a body, a self-regulatory body that is supposed to be guiding the conduct of journalists and members of the press. Let's say for the sake of argument, Ritu signs up for that, we sign up for that, a bunch of other journalists and media organizations all sign up for that because you're supposed to sign up to that, right? You're a digital media house and now you're supposed to be signing up for some self-regulatory bodies supervision. I'm not even going down to the government body, where that's obviously an entire different kettle of fish. That the silver lining to that particular dark cloud would be if there would be a quid pro quo in that once you've signed up to that, and let's say you have a proper judge like a Justice Lokur or somebody who's running that, if you also then said that there can be no case filed, no FIR filed, no journalist or belonging to any of these organizations being picked up, no freelance journalist who has signed up for that being picked up or harassed without the consent of that body. That body has to say yes as the prima facie case. Is that going to happen? I doubt it. But you've got to look for silver linings in potential clouds. So I just feel, I mean, that's essentially what I wanted to say before you start a deep dive into these particular rules. I think it's only a small aspect to what is happening anyway.
All right. Okay. Ritu, I'm going to come to you now. Just tell us what you felt ever since you've heard and read about all of this, and what do you feel now?
I think the first question that one needs to raise is it really within the law? Are these rules or these guidelines, what law are they under? It's definitely way beyond the jurisdiction of the IT Act. It's under the IT Act 2021 that these guidelines have been issued, but it is digital news or news per se, or any kind of censorship or any kind of punitive action or regulation under the IT Act. It's just outside of that. It's unconstitutional. It goes against Article 19 or Article 14, freedom of speech, the right to freedom, freedom of press. So the first question was really that what is the validity of these guidelines? So before we jump in and say, and sort of scramble for what all we need to do in terms of compliance, I think the important thing was, and there was a lot of huddle, all of us questioning each other on, are you going to comply? How are you? What does this grievance officer need to be, etc. But before you jump to those questions, the first question was, in a democratic country, what is the validity of these? The buyer has filed a petition questioning the court on the validity of the IT Act, Information Technology Act, and how does it, what jurisprudence does it have over news media, digital news media? And the Quint has filed a petition in the Delhi High Court as well, asking that question, but also raising the constitutional issue. And I think it's important for those questions to be asked, because I mean, once this is in play, if nothing else, let's say there is no coercive action. If nothing else, the least that will happen is extensive self-censorship, Let us for a minute say that the government is going to be democratic about it. Let us for a minute believe that. Not that we have too much reason to believe that, but let us for a minute believe that. It will definitely lead to self-censorship. It will definitely lead to all of us, a lot of digital-only news is working with very, very tiny resources, with very tiny teams, with, we don't have large legal teams, etc. So there is the potential for all of us to be completely embroiled in endless red tape. That's the first level. Just the first level of this is that will happen. Of course, the worst that can happen is the takedown and the complete, not just censorship. We've seen in the Tandav case, it's not just censorship. It wasn't good enough that the makers were okay with apologizing or with, I don't know whether they edited parts, but there was this, from censorship, it's moved to criminalization. The people running helter-skelter for bail. So, the Tandav matter happens, and within days of the Tandav matter, these guidelines are rolled out. So there is a narrative which has people really now looking over our shoulders, and all of us have trolls going at us for this headline, for this story. Now each of those will get weaponized against us. So our view was that before we start worrying about the worst case scenario, or worrying about censorship, or worrying about the state cracking down on us, it's the stepping back and really saying what right, or what, now the two ways of interpreting the matter, the Supreme Court on the OTT matter saying that these guidelines have no teeth. Does that mean that more teeth will be added here? Or is it that there will actually be a rolling back and questioning of the validity of these? I remember reading a paper by the Stanford Cyber Policy body or team, and the question that it asked was that if a democratic state tames technology, then can the democracy survive? And in a sense, that's what's being done, because the presumption of these guidelines is that there is no regulation on digital news media, which is not true. We are answerable to defamation laws. We are answerable to any laws on obscenity or anything that flouts. So it's not that it's a free for all. And also, I think what we need to look at is how, and we can do that a little later, is how the three-tier structure for regulation is structured. I think it's important to look at that. And it's also important to look at, since we're also here to look at it from a technology policy thing, on what does it do in terms of privacy. I mean, I know we've all had questions to raise about end-to-end encryption, but if these policies require the source to be identified, then end-to-end encryption is also something that will be out there to be discussed. So that's, at word go, this is really what it is for me.
Great, especially the part about the law in itself, and is this actually applicable in a democratic country? I think it's something that everybody is questioning, though a lot of people also question that there hasn't been enough that has come from especially news and media organizations that have actually banded together against the entire thing. But again, we'll talk about that. Now to you. Would have been a very interesting time for you if you were still with your former employees, Twitter, right? This would have been an absolute crackerjacker situation for you, and especially since you were head of pretty much everything that comes under the new rules, which was news, politics, and government. You would have been on the hottest seat in town, right? So what do you feel now?
I'm glad I'm not on it, firstly. Secondly, I think in context, specifically in context to the new rules, if they were coming from a place of the strengthening of our internet governance ecosystem, that would be admirable. But they're not. They're coming from a place of exercising more control over all forms of media that the government supposedly is unable to control in the way that it wants to. So if you take a good hard look at the provocation that's resulted in many ways just sort of this moment, which is Twitter sort of standing up to the government in context of compliance of an order in full, an order that we don't know what the contents are of, an order that we don't know what all it encompasses in context of withdrawal of withholding of content, taking down of accounts, and so on and so forth. Uh, an order that clearly is outside the ambit of the constitution and speech laws that it advocates and promulgates. The fact that an entity like Twitter, which uh, per se doesn't have a stellar record on freedom of speech in any case, in the Indian context at least, has had to has had to take a stand and show the mirror to the government, and almost like read its own laws back to it, saying, hey, we can't comply in full because the order is unconstitutional. And yet there is no mechanism for us to understand as people who participate in these conversations in the public sphere as to what the actual contents of the order are, as opposed to a mechanism that lets us do that. What we have are more and more opaque rules that now talk about traceability, that now talk about appropriate punishment for misappropriate content, without there being any conversation around establishing of processes that help establish a link between offline violence and online speech. So, in as much as these laws are, as I said, like an instrument of further tightening of control, they need to be talked about and framed in exactly that way. They are not what the country needs at this point in time. What we need, and there are also laws for technology that's 10 years old. The law is finally catching up to text-based platforms that have the power of like spreading information at like a blindingly fast speed, while as the world is moving, as we know, from that moment of internet sharing to a moment of ephemerality in many ways. And 10 years later, we're going to again get a set of laws uh, that have fallen behind on the technological framework. So the thinking is outdated in context of how these spaces need to be regulated, uh, and that it seriously is calls into question the government's intent as to what it wants to do with these powers that it seeks for itself. They are definitely not powers that it seeks for the citizen.
Okay, the government's intent, again, something that everyone has really been discussing and debating for a very, very long time. I think the government's intent seems to be fairly clear as to what they're really trying to achieve. So now I'm going to go down to some specific questions, and we'll now take it much, much quicker. So I'm going to now go to Vikram first and then come to Ritu on this one. So digital news media and video streaming platforms like OTT seems to have got a lot of special love. They weren't even part of the 2011 rules. Is there clarity now in your mind as to what is digital news media as a platform? Is it small or big? Number of users? Because for some social media platforms, they do have that distinction. Then the oversight committee, emergency blocking powers without an opportunity of hearing. Isn't this all a little bit scary? As Ritu did say, if this does, doesn't seem right under the law, but if it does go and become a rule, are you clear about everything, or is everything still a little vague, Vikram?
Look, who can be clear on anything where the entire question eventually becomes one of interpretation? And that's part of the problem, right? When you're saying, okay, this is anti-national content, now what's anti-national content, right? How do you define anti-national content? How do you define sedition? How do you define anything? So the fact of the matter is the terms are all so vague that you're not quite sure what will come into it, what will not come into it. And that's why eventually the self-censorship becomes more and more because you have no idea what can be taken out of context and be used to file. So either have these bodies coming after you, or to be having, as I said, random FIRs coming after you in place after place. So it's that lack of definition that is actually the scariest part. The issue is, and coming back to Ritu's constitutionality point, that's part of what we're really facing. You think we have the freedom of speech, except when it comes to ABC, right? Now that ABC is so loosely defined that it eventually becomes the question of any thanedar, any government servant, or any judge. Were you offending a friendly nation? Now, what does offending a friendly nation mean? Like, what does that even mean? If I'm saying something about Trump, am I offending a friendly nation? Am I not? So the lack of definition, as you correctly said it, is where the problem is. Because you're then constantly at the mercy of whoever chooses to interpret it in whichever manner. So ideally, it should be far more specified that if you have done defamation and proved in a certain manner, and these are the specific things that count. Otherwise, it's an open-ended question.
Isn't it specially kept vague by intent? Ritu, I'd like you to weigh in on this. Isn't this entire generality, this fact that they are refusing to define too much, and there's so much, as you read through, hundreds of questions come up as to how would that be defined. You spoke about the three-tier system, but there's also part where you can have an emergency block where the three-tier system almost doesn't come into play. Is this all by intent, this entire generalization, keeping it very, very vague?
I think it is, because and we've been seeing this for a while, that not just in this instance, a lot of new policies and laws that have come out of late have been kept extremely vague and opaque so that they are completely open to interpretation selectively. And the chilling effect has, I'm just saying the context is equally important. We've just seen, a lot of young people being thrown into jail on a lot of presumptions, and not on the basis of evidence, for instance. So there is a whole, almost like a pattern that you see of how the chilling effect has been created. I spoke about the Tandav matter, but there's also been a lot of young activists. We've all been activists when we were young, so we all know where that is coming from. But now you possibly have a situation where a lot of parents are telling their kids that, just shush up on social media.
Absolutely.
And focus on your careers, etc. So because it's so vague on what I can be doing as a young activist, which will be seen as criminal activity. So similarly, if you were to it's like he said, what is anti-national? What defines that? What these were rules meant for intermediaries, which have just been picked up and applied to news media or to OTTs. That in itself is where the problem starts, right? And also, if you were to look, and there's things that there are some things that there is a lot of detail on. For instance, they're saying, yes, you can go ahead and form a self-regulatory body, and there's a lot of detail on who must comprise and what the numbers should be on the self-regulatory body. And they've also had the specifics of the constitution of the self-regulatory body has to be approved by the ministry. They've also had the lovely detail of saying, like you pointed out, that a matter can completely bypass, a complaint or a grievance can completely bypass the three-tier system, go directly to the MIB or to the intermediary soft oversight body, which and immediate action can be taken with that. Why do we have a situation where you will not give the digital news publisher the chance to be heard? Why would you have that? What is defined as an emergency block situation? So yeah, and then how self-regulatory is the body if it has to be approved by the ministry? Which means that you are coming to us from a position of suspicion and not from a position of enabling and encouraging self-regulation. Also, who gets covered by this? we know of a lot of senior journalists who have now started their own sort of platforms, which they're only putting out on social media right now. What are they seen as? Is that does that come under the digital news definition of a digital news publisher? They may or may not have an independent URL or a IP that they own, but will they still get covered if somebody puts and what kind of a complaint is worth? Can I turn around and say that, listen, this complaint has come, but it's really so facetious that I don't need to respond to it? For the last 5 years at the Quint, for instance, the troll army, every time they just come up with this one headline. We once, for God knows why, we put out a headline which said, kids wreak terror on Holi, something like that. And now somebody has taken offense that you have equated a Hindu festival to terrorism. Now, is that something that we should be addressing? Who decides? Do I, as a publisher, or does the self-regulatory body that I'm turning to should agree with? Do they get to say that this is stuff and nonsense, and we will not?
Or the emergency block can take it down without even any of those recourses, right? So yes.
So not just the definition of what is anti-national, what is against the security of the country, etc., but what defines a? If I have a YouTube channel, am I a digital news publisher? And if in the new YouTube channel, I also cover current affairs, do I get covered by this? I think a lot has been left very vague so that it can be subjectively or selectively.
Right, absolutely. Raheel, one of the things that a lot of people speculate about, and I'd love to understand from you if you have any inputs on that, how will foreign news media organizations be regulated by an Indian authority? There are, of course, multiple ways that one can think this can happen, but some of them actually publish from abroad and are available in India. They don't even have a single person out here as staff or office or otherwise. Do you want to take a little shot in the dark as to how you think they'll be able to do it?
Interestingly, as I just met several international publishers, as part of being on the Reuters Institute of Study of Journalism on their advisory body, and I realized that I was breaking the news to them because no formal communication has gone out on that. So now it's extremely vague, right? If I upload content which is being consumed in the country, now if I upload content in California, but it's still available to me via the internet in the country, do I still need to have a grievance officer over here? If I have reporters in the country, but that content is not being beamed into India, but the reporter is reporting out of India on a platform which may be geo-blocked here, does that reporter need protection against these rules? And there was a flurry of questions that was flying at me when I, so to say, broke the news here, and there was no I said, listen, there is no clarity here, but there is clearly no communication that has gone out yet, as was evident to me.
Okay. Thanks, Ritu. Raheel, anything? Do you have any inputs on this? What do you think? Is it still exactly what Ritu said? They don't even know about it, so therefore how it will be regulated? And there are so many scenarios that are so vague. And how many mix-ups can there be in this kind of a situation?
Yeah, no, I think the vagueness is intentional in that with there being no need to define what exactly the parameters are of such an order, such a law, or such exceptions, it gives the government like wide-ranging powers to do whatever it wants to do without spelling it out. Like, so if you look at the current context, even foreign correspondents that are stationed in country over the course of the last 18 months have had to run through a lot of hoops to go to places like the Northeast, Kashmir, and a few other entities that they otherwise could freely report from. So in that sense, the dial of control has already been, it's been upped a few notches. And this I would say is another sort of attempt, more official, if you will, to make sure that the government at least like exercises some amount of power in context to how foreign correspondents and foreign media organizations are framing it, because that in the last few years has emerged as a fairly strong bastion of critique for the government's policies, both domestic and international.
Right. Okay. No, I think it's something that I'd love to see. And I think you're totally right. A lot of this has been kept deliberately vague because you can selectively use it where you really require it. So now one more thing that I'm going to come back to you, Raheel, for is, and that is this entire thing about significant social media intermediary threshold, 50 lakh registered users. But it also says any intermediary. So, it's again coming down to that entire thing of, at one part you can actually define it, and another you can say any intermediary when required. You spoke about the fact that Twitter didn't have such a good record, but they do seem to have taken on the government in the last few occasions. But then again, even Twitter does things very selectively. For instance, in Turkey, they have a set of new rules fairly close to what we're trying to do here in India, and Twitter seems to be okay out there. How do you think it's going to actually pan out?
Well, Turkey is not a shining example of freedom of speech.
But the
law.
fact that Twitter has done something out there, that it's I'm talking more about Twitter and these significant social media intermediaries as a whole.
I think the question is more in context of how we imagine what is the spectrum on which we imagine our speech laws to be. Are they closer to China or closer to America? And I think Turkey is closer to China than it is closer to America, right? Like, so the question to ask from our point of view is how do we imagine the future of speech in India, and by extension, what is the future of dissent? Because these two are clearly like they're interlinked questions, and the future of dissent has been outlawed as we speak. Which is to say that the future of speech is also in danger. In context to Twitter's positioning, it operates by wherever it's incorporated, it operates by the law of the land. In the Indian context, it's an Indian entity doing business in India, paying taxes in India. So it's subject to rules and regulations framed by the government from time to time, which is also the context in which it's hauled up every now and then for non-compliance or compliance. I think what's a good indicator of looking at the state of things, all things Twitter, so to speak, is the number of requests that have come Twitter's way in the last few years, right? Like every 6 months, Twitter does a transparency report that very clearly details the number of requests it gets from a government, and there's a detailed breakdown in context to what those requests are, whether they are account removal requests, content being withheld, content removal requests, and so on and so forth. In the last 6 years, those numbers have dramatically shot up, more so in the last 2 years. So in that now with these new rules, the maneuverability of these companies is starting to, they are starting to feel the heat, so to speak. What's interesting is parallelly this push for this Indian Atmanirbhar ecosystem of apps, so to speak. And I'd be very, very curious as to how that push develops, because in a way it's sort of like is a, it's, and I've said this before, that if we want a seat at the democratic high table, we need to play by the rules of what that means. We can't sort of like aspire to be China in some ways and America in some other ways. It's an either or. So unless we do a walled garden where we have our own search engine, we have our own equivalent of a Twitter, we have our own equivalent of a WhatsApp, we have our own equivalent of a Facebook, and what have you, and that comes with a certain kind of internet regulatory framework, or we or we sort of play the we are a free and open society game, and that comes with its own advantages and disadvantages depending on where you look at it from. What seems to me at this point in time is that the government is trying to do both. While it is waving the flag of being the largest democracy, it's also sort of like, if you are a college student who has said something about the government in a particular forum, you could be subject to Disha Ravi is a really classic example, right? Like, prima facie, the case against her, and she is out on bail right now, is fairly ridiculous. Like, you can't, like, a Google document that lists out what tweets to send and so forth and so on and so forth should not be grounds for jailing anyone. And here we are in the March of 2021 talking about these cases where a whole host of young people are being systematically dissuaded from having a say in how speech evolves in the country and what speech is allowed. So social media platforms in that context have the unenviable job uh, of, unfortunately, being the arbiters of this very difficult conversation. Thankfully, the norms of the internet are changing, uh, and there is a bigger, greater focus on the approach to free speech being a lot more nuanced than what it has been, particularly in the global south. So I do, in parallel, as I'm sort of like dismayed by, as I said, the framework uh, of the new laws, what gives me hope is that a lot of young people are thinking about speech in a more nuanced way.
Okay. And speaking of Atmanirbhar and Indian apps and everything else, I'd love to know from the panel how many people have used Koo and how many have an account. Raheel, I'll start with you. Are you
I don't.
cooing?
No, I'm not cooing, and I don't intend on cooing. Again, like, nothing against the app, but like, if it performs the same function that I already have an app for, I'm not going to go do, like, I'm not going to have two apps to do the same thing. The second thing is that Twitter serves a particular, and I say this as a user of 10 years, as an employee of 5 years. It serves a particular function, right? Like, it can connect you to folks in your immediate circle, but it can also connect you to anyone and everyone in the world. And I've, for the last 10 years, it's served that purpose for me. In that Koo is an incredibly hyper localized app uh, that, again, like, I don't see utility for myself for. I haven't signed up, and I don't intend on signing up. The other
Okay.
aspect is there's a lot of people who also are, the government in a particular moment of anger, I think, and positioning a whole host of folks from the government who are like opening accounts and so on and so forth. But I didn't see any of those folks deleting their Twitter accounts. Uh, that to me would signify a shift in usage slash user base. Plus, for any community to be successful, you need culture to migrate to that community. Uh, Only a particular kind of political conversation, if you are just hosting that, it then becomes an echo chamber. And unfortunately, at this point in time, I think that's the niche that it occupies. Uh, and I have, again, no interest in participating in that niche.
All right. Okay. Vikram, are you cooing?
Well, I mean, like, Editor G certainly has got a Koo account right now. That's because we have a general philosophy that we should be in as many places as possible. So Editor G is.
Did you get a call to be on it, or did you take the decision on your own?
So we took the decision on our own. We didn't get any calls from any particular headquarters saying that we need to do this. But yeah, in general, when I was actually interviewing the founder of Koo for a program I was doing, so he said you must get a Koo account, and so Editor G does have a Koo account. But clearly, we also, as Raheel said, we still have a Twitter account which is far more active and far more being used. But I just want to take on from a bit of what Raheel was saying about the international aspect of this. I mean, some of the jobs that are implied, if you look at the rules, are really, they got to be the worst jobs in the world. Like this poor person who's supposed to be interacting with law enforcement organizations 24/7. and people who are supposed to take personal liability for anything wrong that happens, you've got to find somebody who is really brave or really desperate or both to want to say, okay, I'm putting up my hand, that's the job I really want to do, for a while. And it's interesting to see how all of this is going to play out. I think Raheel is talking to some of the contradictions that are inherent in all of this, right? Because you may say, and that is clearly the publicly stated position, that you don't care about Freedom House, you don't care about the Sweden, look at who the hell is Sweden, they're a monarchy, so we don't care about them, we don't care about anybody else. But at the same time, you're part of Quad and you're one of the leaders of the democratic world. Now, at some point, there is going to be, this appears to be a contradiction. Now, it's very possible that nobody will care about the contradiction. We'll say, we don't care. We believe this is us. We are too big. We're too important. Everyone else owes us everything. So we don't care what everyone else thinks. This is what we're going to do. Or is that escalating backlash that I think is coming certainly from the international press? And is it going to start having an impact? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It really, I guess, depends to some extent on how the American government will react, whether Biden wants to take a stance in it, who the next American ambassador is going to be. Does the Indian government care about what any of these people feel? So we'll have to see. I don't think the foreign press particularly matters much to the government. They almost view it as a badge of honor if the New York Times or the Washington Post is criticizing them. But let's see what other ramifications there.
So, interesting thing, even I wanted to ask, especially you, about this. How difficult is it going to be to fill that position of grievance officer, compliance officer? Vikram used 2 words to describe, either extremely brave or, another, but there are many other words that come to my mind of someone taking that job. How difficult do you think it will be to actually fill a position like that for you?
Well, it depends on how. I think it's definitely somebody who has to have some understanding of where bureaucracy works and the way the courts work. I don't, we're hoping that it doesn't come to that, which is why we have challenged the rules. So we're not thinking too hard about it right now because we are hoping that it doesn't come to that. Because interestingly, from the point that Vikram raised about how you're being perceived as a democracy on an international level, is what these rules also do, and there is already several bodies which are planning to take that up. It's not just about cracking down on news media. It's also about the rights of the citizen to information. And what do these rules do to the right of the citizen to information? And that's an interesting question that will hopefully be raised soon. And I'm hoping that it's not just going to be digital news media that's going to be pushing back, that the OTT platforms and streaming platforms will also sort of come together to ask that question. So if I can't watch, for instance, the next season of Family Man is currently being put on hold. Why can't I, as a user, have access to that series? And it's being put on hold in a self-censorship sort of way, in an anticipatory, this may cause problems sort of way. So what it's doing to, I'm not even thinking about my grievance officer right now.
So you haven't put out an ad to fill. The HR is not on the job right now then, right?
Absolutely not. What we are doing at DigiPub, you might be aware that, we've come together. DigiPub is now an entity that sort of represents over 40 digital-only news publishers. And we're hoping that, if there are other bodies that also join us in questioning the government. But DigiPub has reached out to the minister and to the ministry 3 or 4 times now, asking for one meeting to see how we can work together to bring in self-regulation. And self-regulation is required. The internet can become a wild place. But we're not getting the meeting now. it's important to get into conversation. Let's not presume that it's all going to be bad, but when you don't get a response to your to your request for a meeting, then you wonder why. Why can't we be in conversation with the ministry?
Okay, I'm going to throw out one more thought that comes to my mind. I'm sure all three panelists will have a yes or a no answer. In any way, I'm going to go to one or two quick questions because I have a lot of questions in the Q&A part also. So I'm going to throw out one thought process. Tell me how wrong or right am I? So let's say that this government actually wanted a 6 out of 10 in terms of the kind of rules it wanted. But it used the typical strategy that you do, that if you want a 6 out of 10 and you believe that a lot of people will say, no, 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 this is too much, you then ask for an 11 out of 10 and then you kind of draw back a little, which is exactly what Ritu is also saying, that, let's talk, let's engage, let's, talk about certain things that we can do on our own. Suppose from 11 they go back to 6, which is what they really wanted. Do you believe this could be the whole strategy? Anybody?
I'm not sure that it's a dial up to eventually dial down and find like something in the middle. I think what it is an imagination of the online ecosystem as an extension of uh, the media landscape, the offline media landscape, for which there are extant rules and extensive rules of controlling it, spoken and unspoken, and that it's been 10 or 15 odd years of the online space thriving in a way that the government hasn't had been able to fully exercise its control over it. And I think it is an effort at making a bid for total control and not partial control, because they partially do control it still. Like if you, again, 66A has, in an ideal world, has no place in a robust internet governance framework, or the OTT rules, for example. We're all adults. I am going to an OTT service to consume what I want to consume. What does the government have to do with what those choices should be? As long as there is a rating system in place, and that specifies the kind of content, and that's really where it ends for the government and begins and ends for the government, in terms of having there being guidelines as to what kind of content this is. But to a nanny, what we are unfortunately becoming a nanny state, where the government is hell-bent upon telling me what is good for me at every step of my online journey, in that sense. And it's not going to stop at, okay, we're going to give you 5 things and then 2 things you can have by yourself. The vision is that there is absolute and total control over determining the platforms, my limitations, and freedoms on these platforms, to the point that where I can't even watch the entertainment that I want to watch. And as is, watching international titles in India was a bit of a tricky proposition because of the censor cuts. And now with the in cinemas, and now that regime is coming to OTTs, thereby throttling what is fundamentally a very, very open space for creativity and creation. And I don't think it's gonna stop there. I think the control is going to be like amped up even more.
Okay, so yeah, sure, Ritu.
Sorry, I just want to remind us that this is coming. This is not new, right? We're already 142nd on the Press Freedom Index out of 100 countries. Nothing to be proud of. The other record that we have is that we have the largest number of internet shutdowns in the world.
I mean, I come from Kashmir, so internet is shut down there at the drop of a hat. We had like internet restored after a year. It is the longest shutdown anywhere in the world. Like, it's not. Yeah, you're right, Ritu. Absolutely, it's not. None of this is new information in that sense. It's and nothing to be proud of.
Rajiv, if I could just jump into this entire question, and also referring to something that I began by saying. I mean, look, if you look at print, print gets away with a fair amount. I think it's also because of the perception that the English language print is only read by X, Y, Z people. So there are certain editorials and columns and all that which get by. Television takes a particular view, which I don't think is particularly creditable anymore. Digital was what needed to be controlled. But again, I want to throw to the others also and ask for there's a bigger problem out here than the digital rules. Because Ritu, at the end of the day, if you're Quaint or you're any other publication, digital or otherwise, and you're writing an article, getting somebody in the government to say, I'm blocking this through emergency power and I'm taking it down, is in many ways the least of your problems. Why is it that Amazon is not wanting to do Family Man or anybody else not to do the Family Man? Because they've faced FIRs in 5 different cities. They're not getting anticipatory bail. They're running from city to city saying, my God, we could be arrested here, we could be arrested there, we're going to be arrested there. And that is the process that is going to be repeated. Look what happened with Rajdeep. Look what happened with Mandeep Punia. We don't hear about it in the papers, but you know how many journalists have been arrested in various corners of this country since January, forget about last year. That's the crux of the problem. That's in fact a more serious problem, and especially because what happens is the second aspect to this is that when those FIRs are being framed and written, those cases and the clauses in the FIRs don't have to ever be justified eventually. You can say UAPA, you can say sedition, you can say arson, you can say attempt to kill this policeman, attempt to wound, it can be whatever. And after 3 years of harassment, when that journalist finally gets his day in court and they finally say that this didn't make sense and the person walks away, too bad. By that time, 3 years of that person's life has gone and he's probably spent like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months inside. We have to find an answer to that, because if you don't find an answer to that, everything else is infructuous, right? Because eventually what will happen is anybody doing their journalistic job will suddenly have 11 FIRs in 11 different states, and that will become the de rigueur practice, and that's it. You're cooked.
You know, and we're all facing some kind of legal matters in any case. So effectively, the one of the aims that has been achieved is that some of our resources and time and mind space has been diverted away from journalism towards battling legal matters. So
and that's going to get worse. I'm
no longer censorship. It's moving towards criminalization. So it's not, Raheel, it's not like movies are being censored. It's gone beyond that.
It's gone beyond, yeah, exactly.
I'm perfectly prepared to make a prediction out here. 12 months from now, if you're not either on bail or applying for bail, then you're probably not. You're doing something really wrong, right? So therefore, that's the question. And I don't know what the answer to that is, which is why I began by saying maybe one of the things that you've got to start asking, whether it's DigiPub, any of the other organizations, you've got to start saying, what happens here? I would actually, as I started by saying, I would almost welcome the self-regulatory body, which says, okay, fine, people who sign up to this have to subscribe to a certain law of conduct. Here are signed up members. Now you can't file random crazy cases and FIRs and all that against a accredited journalist to subscribe to this without getting the permission of this body. Maybe that's better than.
So Vikram, we actually have a very interesting question exactly to do with what you're talking about. Doesn't the judiciary need to be more active and react much more quickly to protect the freedom guaranteed by the Constitution and likely to be threatened by this law or anything else? So that's a question by DM. In fact, we have 2 or 3 more.
I can't tell you how strongly I feel about that. I mean, that is, if you ask me, that is the crux of the entire problem. Because every governments everywhere, central government, state government, tehsil government, district magistrates, any government, any person in a position of authority will always try to subscribe your freedom and impose a writ of the state. It's not something new. It's not the first time that it's happening. The difference is that what you should be having is that the judiciary at every level, the Supreme Court, the High Court, the Sessions Court, the lowest magistrate should be saying, Constitution of India, fundamental rights, I am throwing this crap out, and I am, how can you pick up Mandeep Punia and keep him inside for so much time? How can you pick up this person in Mizoram and keep that person inside? Yes, it is for the judiciary to stand up as the custodian of fundamental rights, top to bottom. If that was happening, we wouldn't really be dealing with 90% of the issues that we are talking about right now. Because you'd say, okay, look, if somebody really is unpleasant, you go to the judiciary, you get relief, and you're fine. The problem is happening because the judiciary is not doing more than it should be doing to defend everyone's basic fundamental right. That's the problem.
Okay, I have exactly 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to just ask, one or two more questions, and again, I'd really appreciate a sentence or two as the answer. So the first question I have is there anything good, because we've more or less discussed in the last 55 minutes things that are not so good, or general vagueness, has been done with intent, does have an ulterior motive and all of that. Ritu, anything when you read through actually comes out as, okay, this part, great?
I think the internet being a bit of a wild place, I think self-regulation is definitely something that we should move towards. So but the important thing is that we need to self-regulation. The self needs to come into play. It has to be a participatory process through a conversation. There has to be an element of trust, number one, and there has to be an element of understanding technology. The state needs to become an enabler of the self-regulation and not be somebody who's coming down with a sledgehammer on it. So it has to be participatory. Is self-regulation required? Yes, of course it is. Does this? Yeah, end-to-end encryption. I'd love to know who started the whole Tablighi Jamaat, nonsense on WhatsApps. Yeah, how are we using all of this? So I think if there is more transparency, there is more, there's a conversation, and there is a trust in the self-regulation. So if we are putting together, if we are reaching out to eminent, unimpeachable members of civic society and saying they come together and they're going to put together a self-regulatory body, why does it need the approval of the executive to say that, yes, these people can come together and
right. Absolutely. Raheel, anything that you've read that actually kind of talks to you saying, yes, this part is good?
I think there is an overall sort of environment. Like yesterday, I was tuned into this conversation with Balaji S and Nandan Nilekani, and that sort of like, I think in that one is often, as a journalist, one is often sort of like almost every day listening to signals that may seem distressing, and I'm a journalist by training, thanks to Ritu. And that's just how things are. But I do think that the last 6 to 7 years there is an emphasis. Say, for example, payments in India, in the way that they have moved forward, is a really, really big success story. So there is the development of India stack as an entity.
Within this entire new rules to do with technology and the intermediary, within the intermediary rules, anything that you thought was good?
Yeah, no, it's all terrible news. I'm sorry. I thought you meant like generally in the country.
No. I wasn't talking about the general bleak situation and what's that one silver lining. No, I wasn't talking about that. No, okay. Last question to the entire panel, and I'll start with you, Vikram, on this one. So let's look at the perfect scenario. You've spoken a little bit about what could be better. Ritu's spoken about it. Raheel's spoken about, though he's been more on the pessimistic side with pretty much everything, and maybe justifiably so. Vikram, what could be the perfect solution to all of this? If, let's say, the engagement with the government happens, there is enough conversation that happens, they do dial it down a little bit. Perfect scenario.
Perfect scenario, according to me, is self-regulatory body which is empowered to monitor what you can call bad behavior, set up by the industry with people in it. If you have to have a good heads and all that, get retired Supreme Court judges like Justice Kapur or somebody else who everybody would trust and have a certain amount of faith in. That body is empowered to look in and look at cash questions where people are doing crazy stuff, child pornography, actually spreading anti-national thoughts or terrorism or stuff like that. So that body looks into it, has teeth, which can say, okay, fine, you've done X, Y, Z, the following penalty will happen. And that body is set up. But flip side, all other rules for accredited organizations, you can't be picking up people for any other thing. You have to get the consent of the body.
Okay. Ritu, perfect scenario if that conversation does, that dialogue does happen?
agree with everything that Vikram just said. And I think the only thing I would say is that these emergency blocking without giving a hearing to, at whatever level, without giving a hearing to the publisher, you cannot kill the immunity of press freedom. That I think we have to meet. That has to be the meeting ground.
Okay. So, Raheel, you get the last word, and hopefully it'll be an optimistic one. Perfect scenario, even if we go completely and fundamentally against what you believe, that there will be no dial down. Still, perfect scenario eventually.
Look, from my point of view, I'd just really like for the state to trust my instincts and choices as an adult. And leave them for me to be put in a mechanism in place whereby, as Vikram pointed out, very, very obviously negative elements and entities that pop up and populate the web, like child pornography and so on and so forth, are taken care of. But the rest of it really should be the prerogative of citizens, well-informed, obviously, citizens, and the focus should, in that context, be in enabling an environment of critical thought rather than an environment of control.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. It's already been an hour, and I was told very strictly to hold this to an hour. There are many questions also on the Q&A part of it, which hopefully we'll get to answer one by one. But thank you so much. I think it's been very engaging. Like I said right in the beginning, I'm here to get a lot of knowledge because I'm actually very confused reading through the entire thing. Lots of very important things I couldn't talk about, like some of the rules actually ignore technology rules in itself. They want the breakdown of technology rather than taking it forward. Encryption that they want should be broken. Tracing of the originator of information on platforms. I mean, I find it almost ridiculous how that can ever be implemented, knowing how there are platforms that actually have their base, their entire business idea and strategy works on that encryption. So I'm just wondering how most of those things will happen. We didn't get that much of time. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of this. Thank you so much to the panel, and back to you, Manika.
Manika, you're speaking.
Manika, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry, technology, as you can see.
No, you were just so mesmerized by the conversation, Manika.
I was, and I'm sure as was the audience. I think all of you provided so much context and sort of, I think, so much clarity with the kind of situation, like Rajiv rightly said, there is so much confusion and so much ambiguity surrounding all that is going on. But thank you so much. And I think part 2 is a wonderful idea, and we must do more of these. It has been just brilliant having you on. So thank you again, and have a good night.